This is a video that I wish I would have had when I got started, and I'm not focusing on gear in this other than kind of commenting on basically the style of light or the type of camera we've got. One of the first things you'll have to figure out is how big your space has to be, or if you've got a space in mind, if that'll work for a podcast studio. I'm really lucky that at home, I've got a big finished space that is not cut up into a bunch of smaller rooms. It's pretty much just a big wide open space that we were already using as a home office. That was the obvious spot to put a podcast studio, but it's a little bit of a funny space. You know, I think ideally a person wants like a square podcast studio, but ours is rectangular and it's quite narrow and then quite long. So lots of square footage for the space, but just the layout is not optimal. Our space is 12 and a half feet wide by 20 deep with 8-foot ceilings. And that works out to 3.8 meters wide, 6.1 meters deep, and 2.4 meters tall. It's an awkward space. And so we had to figure out what our layout was going to be. The room is too narrow to shoot width-wise. We did try it, but there just wasn't enough room for it. So then the next choice we had to make was, were we going to shoot against the little stub wall behind us or the windows? Shooting against the windows, you know, that's not great because you could have light coming through and that kind of thing. So in the end, we decided that we would shoot with this solid wall behind us and use a backdrop to cover the hallway. And I'll talk more about the backdrop later in the video. Even though the room is 12 and a half feet wide, it's functionally narrower than that because we've got storage and, shelves and that kind of stuff on either side. So it really makes the space that much narrower. It also makes it hard to shoot in because it's so narrow that both sides of the room show up on camera when we're shooting and you see our mess. So in the end, what we did is we just started using curtains to hide that mess. And I'll go more into detail a little bit later in the video how we hide our mess. When we knew which orientation we were going to shoot in, we had to figure out how far away from everything the table had to be. We knew we didn't want it right up against the walls, and we knew that we need to have enough space for guests to be able to comfortably get around the table. In the end, what we ended up going with is that the table is about 4 feet or 1.2 meters off the backdrop, and then from the side is about 5 feet or 1.5 meters from the wall to each side of the table. So then that means that when a guest comes in, they've got about 5 feet to get around. And that 4 feet off the back wall, it just makes it look like it's a little bit of a bigger space and we don't have everything just shoved into the corner. The other thing you'll need to figure out when you're getting started is how many cameras you're going to work with. Of course, we all see multicam podcasts on YouTube and we think that's the look that you want to go for. And in the end, we did end up going for that look. But when we started, we only had one camera and we didn't want to invest a whole bunch of money into gear in case the podcasting thing wasn't something we wanted to pursue. So what we did with that one camera is it shot 4K. So we would put guests at a table side by side, not too shoved together, but close enough that they could get in one master wide shot, and then far enough apart that we could crop the other person out. So we would shoot in 4K and edit in a 1080 timeline, and that kind of faked a 3-camera setup for a while. It was more work to edit and that kind of thing, but as a way to figure out if podcasting was something we wanted to do, it was a really affordable, cheap, easy way to go about it. The next thing I had to figure out was where to put cameras, and that was something that I really struggled with. In my head, for whatever reason, I imagined that we'd have a table with guests and the main camera would be like basically on the other side of the room and way zoomed in. But in the end, that's not what happened at all. The main camera is much closer than I thought it would be. When we're shooting with 2 guests, our main camera is 29 inches from the front of the table, which is 0.73 meters. And the center of the lens is 48 inches from the ground. That's 1.2 meters. So, about 4 feet up and, 2.5 feet back from the table. When we're shooting with 3 cameras, each guest then gets their own camera, and those cameras are crisscrossed. So the one on the right gets the guest on the left, and the one on the left gets the guest on the right. Each camera is 70 inches or about 1.8 meters from each guest. The center of each lens is about 50 inches or 1.27 meters off the ground. I wish I could give you use this camera, this focal length, this distance from person, but it's really going to depend on the room that you've got and how you've laid it out and what gear you've got. But I think a basic guideline for it is that your main camera, it's probably going to have to shoot really wide, and it's probably going to be closer to the table and the guests than you anticipated it would be. And then the cameras that are each to pick up a specific guest, those are further back, but we zoom in more. So you're probably gonna have a longer lens on those. So the main wide shot, wide lens up close, and the specific guest cameras are further back with a longer lens on them. Something else you'll have to figure out is how you're gonna treat the room for sound. Typically in a room, you have a lot of reverb, and maybe there's like noise from neighbors or noise from the street or something like that. And in a perfect world, you would soundproof it, but that's can be a pretty significant undertaking. And I don't think it's realistic for most people in their home studio. So maybe what you want to do is like treat it or like sound deaden it. We had the added challenge of our space being like a multi-use space. We use it as our home offices and as storage. So however we sound deaden the space, we didn't want it there up all the time that we had to look at it. We built a system that really works well for us. And depending on how big a space you've got, maybe it's something would work well for you. What we ended up doing is we bought a bunch of moving blankets from Amazon and lined the room with them. To make it easy to put them up and take them down, what we did is we bought self-adhesive towel hooks, like something you would buy at the hardware store and you'd put next to your kitchen or to your bathroom sink for a face cloth or a tea towel or something. And we lined the room with those and then hang the blankets on them. The specifics of that is that we bought 12 heavy-duty moving blankets that were 72 inches by 80 inches, which is 1.8 meters by 2 meters. And then with our adhesive towel hooks, we bought 36 of those and we spread them out, depending on the space, a couple inches to 6 inches away from the ceiling, and spread those out by 20 inches or about half a meter. Then we bought curtain grommets and cut holes in the top of the blankets to put these grommets through. So basically we made like really heavy duty curtains. Now what we do, that we've got all this set up, is we go and we get our stack of blankets with grommets in them and we hang each grommet on a hook and just carry on all the way around until the whole room is wrapped in blankets. It works really well for us. It really cuts down on a lot of the reverb. It's definitely not a professional recording studio, but I think for what we're going for and what we're charging to use the space, I think it more than works, and it's relatively easy to put up and put down, and it packs away to a pretty small package when we're not using it. It fits in a box that we can shove under the table out of the way, so that's really handy. Some kind of carpet would really help, but we haven't done that. We've got a hard tile floor, and even treating something on the ceiling would probably be good, but again, we just haven't done it. We did go as far as putting a black backdrop that a photographer would use on the ceiling, more to control light from bouncing around the room than to actually sound deaden, but I think it does deaden a little bit of the sound as well. The next thing we had to overcome was lighting the studio, and we've been making YouTube videos for quite a while and had some gear, but it wasn't really great gear. We had ordered way back at the start of our career like a softbox kit from Amazon, and it was 2 softboxes and 2 umbrella lights, and they had 100 watt or 150 watt CFL bulbs in them. And we started it. It was okay, but they took up so much space, and our space is narrow to begin with. So it wasn't really a great fit. And it was something that we had to take apart and put together all the time. And then that was a pain in the ass. It slows you down when you're going to make a video. And then you get lazy and you don't want to put it away afterwards. And it's in the way when you're trying to live your life. So that was not optimal. When we decided we were going to get serious about podcasting, I bought big boy podcast lights. They were just way too big for the space. They overpowered the space. There was not room to have more than 1 light at a time in here. So in the end, I ended up just returning all that stuff and really scaling down the level of the light. Our main light in here is a 50 centimeter lantern that I think I got off AliExpress. It's kind of like a no-name light. I like that it accepts a standard bulb in it. 1 bulb is not enough to light what we want to light. So I bought a 4-way splitter that you could put 4 bulbs into it. And we've got 4 100 watt equivalent LEDs in it. And that lights most of the space for us. We've got that hanging overhead. And then we have 3 sets of 2 construction lights. So those are just like the clamp on construction lights that you'd go get at, Home Depot or Canadian Tire, something like that for, $10 a piece. And then they've got the same 100 watt bulbs in them. It's pretty harsh, the light that comes out of it. So we ended up using parchment paper that we affixed to it. Some of the lights we use like spring clamps to hold them up. Sometimes we just use electrical tape to tape them up. And that works really well for us. The main lantern light adds most of the light. And then we use the construction lights to do like hair lights or to light the backdrop or like a fill light or something like that. When we started using the lantern, what we realized is that because the light was coming from overhead, if the table is lengthwise, the table threw a funny shadow on the legs of the guests. So we got our soft boxes that we weren't using anymore and just put them on the ground. And we put one single 100-watt bulb in it just to throw a little bit of light so it's not a black abyss at the bottom of the screen. And that really does everything that it needs to do. As I'd mentioned, we've got windows at one end of the room. So there were, you'd have daylight coming through, and at night there'd be a headlight that would come through and screw up your shot. So when we did the sound blankets, that really helped us. That basically blacked the room out. So now night or day when we go and we shoot, we've got the blankets up, we really control all the light in the room, which I think is really important. Like I said, we had stuff on stands, but we just got sick of putting it up and taking it down. So last year we built a homemade light grid for above us, just out of pipe from the hardware store and some anchors. And that's worked really well. We've got the lights hanging overhead and it keeps it up there out of the way. We're not taking it down between shoots. And we also bought like a remote control light switch so we can plug all the lights in. And then instead of having to climb up on a ladder and turn on a power strip or something like that, we can just hit a remote control switch and all of our lights come on for the studio. And that's a nice little quality of life improvement. You're also going to want to figure out how you want to decorate your set. And if you're like me and you watch podcasts on YouTube, you see a lot of these really extravagant places that they have real furniture and a purpose-built set and all the rest. And then we kind of dream of that's what our space is going to look like. But then you just kind of run into the reality that it's a lot of money to buy furniture. And in our case, it's, again, a small space that we didn't really have a lot of room to put furniture that was going to stay in one spot permanently because, yeah, it would just get in the way for us. At first, we decided we would shoot against a green screen. And then that we could have any backdrop we wanted. And it worked, but it just took more time editing. And then you would run into things like spill on the guests and like green spill on the table and that kind of thing. And depending on who the guest was and what their hairstyle was, sometimes you didn't get a really good key on their hair. Or you would tell clients not to wear green, but they would show up wearing green. And then when you go to key it, it doesn't look good. So what we ended up doing in the end is we just ordered a custom backdrop to hang behind us. And that's what's behind me right now. That's a photo that my wife took and we had it blown up to match the dimensions of our back wall. And we can use it to hide the ugly spot where the hallway is behind us. The backdrop hangs up on another pipe that we put up there. And when we're not using it, we can just slide it out of the way like it's a shower curtain. And then running perpendicular to the backdrop, we have drapes on either side of the studio that kind of hides the mess that we've got back there, which is we've got some storage and some shelving units and that kind of thing that don't look great on camera. So we put that there. It's also nice to have kind of just a plain background on the sides because then when you've got a guest and you're using their camera to get a shot of them, it's not really busy behind them. It just is a nice professional look. And when we're done using it, just like the backdrop, we just slide it down the rod and tuck it into the corner at the end. And to use the space without the podcast studio in it, it's pretty much out of the way and unnoticeable. And then finally, you're going to want to figure out furniture. You'll want a table to sit at. You need chairs for your guests to sit in, that kind of thing. As I mentioned, when we got started, we didn't want to spend a bunch of money. So we just shot podcasts with stuff that we had around the house. And we had a comically narrow pine table from IKEA. So what we ended up doing is we would shoot lengthwise and both sit on one side of the table, which was fine to get some practice, but it was not really a very conducive way to shoot. It was kind of awkward to sit there and then to have a conversation with somebody. You were really torn between, addressing the camera or turning a full 90 degrees to talk to the person beside you. And tough to have a flowing, natural conversation when you've got those things in mind. So to get going, it was fine. But eventually we did decide we were going to upgrade to a real table. And we started looking on IKEA and, different places, the brick, but a kitchen table is an expensive thing to buy. And we didn't really want to make that kind of an investment in it. And what we ended up doing was looking on Craigslist. And there was an office in our little downtown that was, I don't know if they were going out of business or they were moving away or to another location or whatever it was, but they had stuff they were getting rid of. And so I think we paid $35 for this table that we're at now, as well as another shelving unit that's not on camera, and brought the table back. And it's got some dings and dents in it, but I've convinced myself that that's character and it looks good and doesn't need to be anything else. Each summer I kind of threaten that I'm going to refinish it, but it's never really produced itself. The only thing I did to the table when we got it is I bought locking casters, and I put a locking caster on each leg so that when we're not using the table, we can slide it out of the way, which, like I said, it's a shared space. So it's nice to be able to move it. And with wheels on it, you only need one person to move it. You're not dragging it across the floor or anything like that. Then as far as chairs, when we started using our kitchen chairs because they were wood and they didn't make a bunch of noise. And then when we decided that we were going to upgrade the studio and take it more seriously, we did look at other chairs, but we ran into a problem with putting chairs away that if you got a folding chair, they were not comfortable and they made noise and they just weren't great chairs. And anything that was comfortable, then they were hard to store. And again, like I've said again and again, we don't have a lot of room. So then that wasn't really an option. So we just kept using our kitchen table chairs and they're fine. They're, they have a cloth seat on them, a little bit of padding, so they don't make a bunch of noise when you sit in them. They're not creaky and they kind of sort of match the color of the table. So it's not super offensive on camera, but yeah, that's all we did. And we don't see any reason to change it up. I tried to include an answer to every question I had when I got started. And like I said, some of it was really specific to our space. But if you need advice about something or you've got a question that I didn't answer, just leave me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer it.